History rarely repeats itself, but it often rhymes. Today, January 12, 2026, we stand at a crossroads, hearing echoes from a century ago, a great power faltering, not in war, but in its financial heart. The British Empire's decline was slow, driven by choices and warnings ignored. The world watched as the leader of its age began to crack. Britain's fall isn't just history, it's a warning for America. Beneath today's headlines, a deeper story unfolds. Trillions in debt, global military costs, and a currency the world may soon question. To understand America's future, we must look at Britain's past and ask, are we repeating their mistakes? Are we mistaking the habits of power for the reality of it? The end of the British Empire wasn't just a matter of flags being lowered or maps being redrawn. It was a story that began quietly, in the pages of dusty ledgers and the careful calculations of accountants. The true unraveling of an empire often starts not on the battlefield, but in the balance sheets, where numbers tell a story of ambition, overreach, and ultimately, decline. For centuries, Britain's dominance was built on the twin pillars of industry and finance. The factories of Manchester and Birmingham powered the world, while the city of London became the beating heart of global banking. But maintaining a vast empire, stretching from the Caribbean to India, from Africa to the Pacific, demanded more than just innovation and ambition. It required a constant outflow of resources, money, and manpower, draining the nation's coffers year after year. The two world wars, especially the second, forced Britain to borrow on an unprecedented scale. Once the world's top creditor, Britain found itself transformed into its largest debtor almost overnight. The government issued war bonds, pleaded for loans, and mortgaged the future to pay for the present. The cost of defending freedom and empire was staggering, and the bills kept piling up. Even as British battleships still sailed the seas and soldiers marched in parades, the reality was stark. The empire's military might had outlasted its economic strength, but only for a fleeting moment. The illusion of power lingered, but the foundation was crumbling. Unable to afford the staggering costs of governing distant colonies, Britain began to grant independence, not as a magnanimous gesture, but out of sheer necessity. The sun didn't set on the empire because it chose to, it set because the empire could no longer pay to keep it shining. Unlike the Roman Empire, which fell to invading armies and internal chaos, Britain's empire faded for a more mundane but equally fatal reason: it simply couldn't pay its bills. The ledgers told a story of mounting debts, unpaid obligations, and a treasury running dry. The lesson is clear: military power, no matter how impressive, is hollow without the economic strength to sustain it. The mightiest fleets and armies are powerless when the money runs out. Faced with impossible choices, Britain's leaders made unthinkable cuts. They shrank the navy, closed overseas bases, and watched as their global presence dwindled. The world's greatest empire was forced to retreat, not by force of arms, but by the cold arithmetic of debt. In the end, the empire didn't collapse in a dramatic battle or a single moment of crisis. It ended quietly, with the closing of an accountant's book, the final tally of debts, and the realization that the age of empire was over. The debts had finally come due, and with them, the curtain fell on the British Empire. A story of debt, not defeat, but a powerful reminder that even the greatest empires are bound by the limits of their resources. The pound sterling was once the world's reserve currency, a symbol of British might and global influence. For over a century, the pound was the backbone of international trade, trusted by nations far and wide. This status gave Britain immense power, allowing it to shape the world's financial systems and dictate the terms of global commerce. The Bank of England's vaults brimmed with gold, and the pound's reputation was unshakable. This privilege let Britain live beyond its means, funding wars, building empires, and enjoying a standard of living that was the envy of the world. London's elites strolled through luxury shopping districts, and the British aristocracy reveled in their wealth, all underpinned by the pound's dominance. The world's goods and services flowed into Britain, paid for with a currency everyone wanted to hold. But this golden era depended on global trust. International bankers, foreign governments, and business leaders all had to believe in the pound's strength. London's financial district buzzed with deals and negotiations as the city became the heart of global finance. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. As debts mounted and the economy weakened, that trust began to fade. The costs of 2 world wars, the burden of maintaining a vast empire, and growing competition from other economies strained Britain's finances. Newspapers blared headlines about economic crises, and government officials scrambled to find solutions as the pound's value wobbled. The world shifted its faith to the US dollar, especially after World War II. America's economy was booming, its industries untouched by war, and its currency backed by vast reserves of gold. International trade began to be priced in dollars, and global reserves flowed into American banks. The pound, once the king of currencies, was now being replaced. At Bretton Woods in 1944, the dollar officially replaced the pound as the world's anchor. Delegates from around the globe gathered to reshape the financial order, and the decision was clear. The future belonged to the dollar. The pound was demoted, its role diminished, and Britain's influence began to wane. Britain tried to resist this new reality, propping up the pound with borrowed money and desperate financial maneuvers. Behind closed doors, officials debated strategies and rushed to secure loans, hoping to restore confidence. But it was a losing battle. The world's appetite for the pound was gone, and every effort to defend it only deepened Britain's debts. The Suez Crisis of 1956 sealed the pound's fate. When Britain tried to assert its power in Egypt, America responded not with troops, but with a financial ultimatum. The US threatened to crash the pound by selling off its reserves, and Britain, unable to withstand the pressure, had to back down. The message was clear. Economic power now trumped military might. A military operation was halted by a financial threat, not force. British troops withdrew, and the world watched as a former superpower was humbled by the realities of global finance. Urgent telegrams flew between capitals, and the lesson was learned. Control of money meant control of destiny. Britain's global financial dominance was over. The once bustling trading floors grew quiet, and the nation's financial institutions faced an uncertain future. News anchors delivered somber reports as the pound's decline became a symbol of Britain's reduced status on the world stage. The nation that once ruled the world's money was now at the mercy of its banker. British officials traveled to Washington, seeking aid and negotiating terms with their American counterparts. The balance of power had shifted, and Britain's fate was now tied to decisions made in New York and Washington, not London. The pound's fall was the final proof. Economic reality trumps pride. No amount of history or tradition could save the currency from the forces of global finance. British citizens watched as their savings lost value, and the nation was forced to accept a new, humbler role in the world economy. The world had moved on, new financial centers rose, and the dollar reigned supreme. The story of the pound sterling's last stand is a reminder that in the end, economic strength, not nostalgia, shapes the fate of nations. Pride blinded Britain to its decline. Leaders clung to the illusion of power, ignoring rising debt and shrinking industry. Instead of tough choices, they tried to fund everything: welfare, military, and the pound's value by borrowing. This impossible balancing act only deepened the crisis. Critics like Keynes warned of exhaustion, but their advice was ignored. The public wanted victory, not retreat. Politicians promised greatness, not reality. Pride prevented learning and adaptation. Britain's leaders saw global shifts as temporary, not fundamental. When pride clouds judgment, decline accelerates. Now, let's take a moment to look at America in the year 2026. The city lights glow, skyscrapers pierce the sky, and the world still sees the United States as the center of global power and innovation. But beneath this glittering surface, deeper currents are at work. Currents that echo a story from a century ago. The parallels to post-war Britain are both striking and, for many, deeply unsettling. Just as Britain once stood atop the world, confident in its empire and its currency, America now finds itself in a similar position. Powerful, yet vulnerable in ways that are easy to overlook. America is the global superpower, issuing the world's reserve currency, the mighty dollar. But this status comes with a price. Our national debt has soared to unprecedented heights, with trillions borrowed to fund everything from social programs to military operations. The world still trusts the dollar, but that trust is not guaranteed forever. We fund our government and military by borrowing on a scale never before seen in history. Every year, new bonds are issued, and foreign investors, governments and individuals alike, snap them up, believing in the promise of American stability. But as the debt grows, so does the risk. The costs of global policing, maintaining bases, fleets and alliances around the world, drain resources that could be used to rebuild our own roads, schools, and hospitals. Our infrastructure ages, and communities feel the strain, even as our military presence remains vast and expensive. Like Britain in its heyday, we try to have it all: unmatched military dominance, a high standard of living, and endless consumption. But much of this is built on credit, on the assumption that tomorrow will always be as prosperous as today. Pride and denial persist. Many Americans, from Wall Street boardrooms to small-town parades, believe the dollar's supremacy is unshakable. The idea that the world could move on from the dollar seems unthinkable, even laughable, to most. But beneath the surface, trust in the dollar is being tested. Financial analysts watch as markets fluctuate, and questions about America's fiscal discipline grow louder. The world is watching, and some are quietly preparing for change. China, Russia, and other nations are taking steps to reduce their dependence on the dollar. They're building new financial systems, trading in their own currencies, and forging alliances that bypass the traditional American-led order. Quiet shifts are happening. Just as they did before, the British pound lost its crown. Headlines come and go, exchange rates flicker, but the underlying trend is clear. The world is slowly, cautiously, exploring alternatives. Yet, we ignore these signs at our peril. Warnings are dismissed, uncomfortable truths are avoided, and the belief in American exceptionalism remains strong. But history has shown that no currency, no empire, is immune to change. The belief that there's no alternative to the dollar is the same mistake Britain made with the pound. Complacency, denial, and overconfidence blinded them to the shifting tides. Will we recognize the warning signs in time, or are we destined to repeat history's lesson, a century later, on the same path? The dollar is America's true source of global power. It lets us borrow and spend with ease, as the world demands dollars for trade and savings. But this privilege is fragile, relying on global faith in the dollar's stability. Our soaring debt and money printing erode that trust. When we use the dollar as a political weapon, even allies seek alternatives. Digital currencies and new financial blocks are emerging in response. If the world moves away from the dollar, it won't be sudden, until it is. Trade could shift to a basket of currencies, ending America's exorbitant privilege. Demand for dollars would fall, and our ability to borrow cheaply would vanish. The impact would be felt by every American. The dollar's reserve status feels distant, until it's gone. If demand for dollars collapses, its value would drop, making imports and essentials far more expensive. Gas, groceries, and everyday goods would cost much more. The government would face soaring interest rates to attract lenders. Mortgages, car loans, and credit cards would become unaffordable. Businesses would cut jobs as borrowing dries up. The economy, built on cheap credit, would stall. The government would face brutal choices: slash spending or print more money. Printing leads to hyperinflation. Austerity brings pain. The American standard of living would fall sharply. Social unrest would follow. This is the true cost of financial denial. The fall of a dominant currency reshapes the world. Without the dollar at the center, global trade becomes fragmented and costly. Regional blocs, Euro in Europe, Yuan in Asia, would rise. America's influence would wane, and sanctions would lose power. Allies would question U.S. reliability and hedge their bets. Rivals like China and Russia would seize new opportunities. The world would become more contested and unstable. No single power would dominate. Instead, a balance of competing interests would emerge. Globalization's benefits could reverse, with higher costs and less reliable supply chains. The decline of American financial dominance would redraw the map of power. America isn't doomed, but it isn't immune to economic laws. Rising debt and denial have never ended well for any power. The first step is to see our situation clearly and shed complacency. Individuals should reduce debt, build savings, and own tangible assets. A resilient personal foundation matters in uncertain times. As citizens, we must demand honesty and fiscal responsibility from leaders. This isn't partisan, it's survival. Both parties must face hard truths and make tough choices. The British Empire's story is a warning, not a prophecy. America can still choose a different path. Our future depends on wise decisions and clear vision. If we ignore history's lesson, we'll have no one to blame but ourselves.